So far this summer, we've shared stories and prayers saying, wow, help, and thank you. Last week, we shared prayers and stories around grief. Today, we engage the theme of hope. Where have you prayed a prayer of hope over the last year and a half? Where have you found hope? Where have you seen hope realized? Christians love to quote today's passage, and we love to quote it cut up into little bits. But it needs all of it for us to understand what we're really saying. Christians like me, folks who love to think that neighborhood is the future of ministry, we love to quote that first part about settling down into the city, digging your roots into a place, seeking the mutual flourishing of your neighbors. We love that part. And all of us love to skip to the bottom of the passage, the very end. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Eternal One, plans to prosper you and not to harm, plans to give you a hope and a future. We love that part. The middle part, we skip over that part a lot. But the middle part is where we live right now. And as climate change teaches us who we have been for the past several centuries, we're going to be living in that middle part for a long time. The middle part speaks of exile. If we know the story of the Jewish people, we know the story of the exiles in Babylon and how they understood their own exile. They used it as a place to interrogate themselves. They didn't see themselves as blameless victims who have been put upon, though they felt free to grieve and lament. But God had invited them to a way of living that would bring abundance and mutual flourishing to all people and all the family of creation, resting the fields, leaving food for the hungry, treating employees equitably, canceling debt, returning land to people who have lost it, not making enormous sums of money off of debt, making good on even accidental harm you cause to others, welcoming strangers. God gives the people laws that are a complex social code that can be summed up, love one another. It can be summarized in Jesus' words in John 15, my commandment is that you love one another. Or we could say love the whole family of creation. The people lost their way. And they saw exile as a result of that lostness, of that abusive and marginalizing way of being. They used it as a time to dig deep in the work of self-knowledge and dreaming of who they would try yet again to be if they were ever returned to their homes. It's from this place of being settled into the work of exile, that you put down roots in exile and in self-interrogation. This is the place where God says, I know the plans I have for you. It is from this place of sheltering so abidingly in place that you marry your children off to your quarantine bubble mates that God says, I have plans to prosper you and not to harm you. It is from this place where repentance meets the present and seasons us into a future of mutually liberating love and justice and welcome and wholeness in a fragmented world. It is from this place that God tells the people, I plan to give you hope. It is from a willingness to dig deep and seek change and live change and become a people who are bent on universal, mutually flourishing, where God says to them, I have plans to give you a future. From the place where we stand, on coastal Salish land, in smoke season, amid climate change, in the middle of a long overdue reckoning for the continuing oppression of our Black siblings, from an ever-widening economic divide where some Seattleites are pleading not to be evicted while others are taking vacations in space, from a closed border literally unwelcoming the stranger, from knowledge that children are still in jail from seeking refuge here, from a divide that makes it too big to ask a person to put on a mask to save the lives of vulnerable children, from such broken relationships that we find ourselves unable to reason with those that refuse to mask to save the lives of vulnerable children from this place. From a realization that we have failed spectacularly, both individually, but more so on a systemic and systematic level. Our culture has failed in bringing mutually liberating love and justice. In this place where sustained quarantine has held us in a crucible where we face ourselves and our ancestors and the future we're building for our children from this place of exile. It is here that hope catches up with us. Okay, so you see how you've missed the mark of love. Okay, the Eternal One speaks over us, drying our tears, though glad we finally let them fall. Okay, let's rebuild this world. Others are already at work. Creation is already at work. They are inviting you to follow them from the margins that you've made into a future. Okay, what you've been up to doesn't work. Now that you see that, I can say to you, I have plans for you, plans to prosper you, plans not to harm you, plans to give you hope. And it does feel absolutely revolutionary to say, as the climate crisis begins to climax, plans to give you a future. God's hope is not light, it is not weak, it is not ignorant of the cries of the oppressed. It does not shut its eyes to how utterly difficult the road toward mutual flourishing is. And there in the shadows of exiles, God's hope puts down its roots and grows. And I do believe that if we survey the last year and a half, we will find that those places where we follow the lead of voices from the margins are the places where we see hope thrive. A friend who works with imprisoned immigrants always reminds me, hopelessness is a symptom of white privilege. When you come and learn at the feet of the oppressed and follow their lead, hope is found. So again, our question is, where have you found hope over the last year and a half? What is your story of hope in COVID times? Over the last year and a half, what is a story of hope that you have? Maybe it's a moment, maybe it's a movement, maybe it's a theme, maybe it's a thread that is woven through the whole story of the pandemic so far. Maybe it is unfinished. As an example, a story of hope may be, for me, early in the pandemic, I watched a lot of Hassan Minhaj. One of my griefs is that Netflix has canceled it. But one particularly powerful piece was on one reason we aren't able to prosecute police for murdering Black siblings. It's because of a lack of precedent. When George Floyd's daughter said, "Daddy changed the world," and when his murderer was convicted, I remembered the cries of the oppressed rising to God's ears. I remember that for some reason I neither understand nor like, God in Revelation said God would wait until the cries of the oppressed were even bigger and louder. And I saw the cries of the oppressed across this nation and even across the world. And I believe that what I saw was God finally doing something about it. It was a small step, but it is also a big step, a necessary step. We are moving, and we have to keep moving. Even as it is a story filled with grief, it is a story that has given me hope. And the hope gives me energy to keep following the lead of BIPOC and AAPI siblings as we seek liberating love and justice. I wonder, where have you found hope in the last year and a half? What is your story of hope? What is your prayer of hope over the last year and a half? I invite you to share.